All right, I'm with Damen Vagge with Peak to Peak out of Colorado, and Damon is a VP of sales and one of the members of the executive leadership team of their company. And I'm excited to have a results interview with Damon right now. So, Damon, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here, bro.
Awesome. So, Damon has a couple of partners he works with. They have a really cool story. They're out of Colorado which is like in roofing, a heavy storm environment. And so when we met, I was actually speaking at a Colorado Roofing Association luncheon, and I did a talk on predictable revenue. And that's when we started our conversation. So, Damon, could you share with me a little bit about what your situation was with numbers and with business model and just the entire environment prior to meeting me? And just explain what that was like a little bit.
Yeah, so the company started in September of 2009, literally under the storm chasing premise. And the gentleman who started the company came to Colorado specifically to chase storms. And what happens inside of a storm environment is a lot of volatility happens inside of a storm environment, the predictability, of course, and the culture is just different. It's very seasonal in nature, and therefore you get a seasonal type mentality where everybody's like going a million miles an hour from May until October, and then everybody pretty much checks out from the end of October until the beginning of May. Inside of that, culture is very difficult to stay consistent. And then you have the sales men and women aspect of it, and the reality of that is storm chasing salesmen and women, it's mostly men, we don't really get a lot of women, but they're just a different crowd. I mean, they have the same mentality. It's feast or famine for them. And so that comes with its own challenges. And so navigating those waters as an executive and somebody building a company is very difficult because you might have them for a few months and then you're probably never going to see them again. And typically when there's a disconnection because of the winter coming, it's normally a weird disconnection. It's normally not a clean split. There's just a lot of weirdness that happens with that. And so we've been doing that before we met you for 9 years, and just up and down, up and down, up and down. Though we've had some very, very successful years, and we've been very successful in storm chasing because of the model that we built. I have a finance background, so I actually built a system inside of the roofing industry that allowed a file to flow through a process very seamlessly. So the back end is phenomenal. The front end, though, can be very messy. And so with the lack of predictability and things like that, you're just in it 1 minute and you're scraping the next.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's like a blessing and a curse, kind of where you are with that, right? It's like 100% a lot of money, but so you guys had some money, you made some money, but what was like the main curse that came with? A curse is a bad word, but the impact of the up and down and not being able to sustain a culture. Like, why was that a problem for you guys?
In being 100% transparent, it's what happens from the top down. Whereas one of the leaders of the company gets very fearful, I would say is probably the best way to put it, through the wintertime. And because of that, having more of a domineering leadership style, he kind of begins to press in areas and micromanage and things like that, because in his mind, he's like, where's that next dollar coming from? So the culture, it kind of ends up being this culture of, during the wintertime, this culture of fear and timidity, where people are like not really knowing how to press in and gain more business. And then you're cleaning up what you got from the summertime, and then you have somebody kind of lording over you. And so the lack of consistency in revenue kind of fosters this fear-based mentality.
Yeah, I don't know how I would handle not having predictable revenue. I might get afraid and anxious, and I might lord over somebody else too, because you want to do your best, right? But some people respond differently. So basically, you had just an up and down environment of sales, which created some kind of a fear, imposing fear onto the team, right? Like winter times,
yes.
Do I keep paying them a salary? Is that out of pocket, or do I have to let them go and start all over? And so it was just a lot of ups and downs. And so when you met me, What was it that struck a chord and said, we need to meet with Ryan, Sales Transformation Group, and what motivated you to buy the program?
Yeah, great question. So JJ and I, so just background. So Brian Dice and JJ hadn't owned the company. They're business partners. I was brought on 7 years ago to really build a marketing and sales division, and have been systematically working systems and processes, since that time. And it's really hard to build a sales division in a storm environment. It's almost impossible, right? And so, so we looked at other things and heard other men speak. And when we went to the CRA and heard you speak, number one, there was just something different. There was a genuineness that we really appreciated, and inside of that genuineness, just the metrics that you lined out, and knowing that there was something else available to us to help predictability and to even just have predictability, really struck a chord with JJ and I. And I mean, that's why we sought you out pretty immediately right after you spoke. And we were like, we want that. We want to get out of this storm, this seasonal type thing, and really get into producing revenue 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, for sure. And so with my guidance, what was the strategy you guys have gone after since then for you in your market?
So the biggest thing was creating that awareness, and then this idea of abundance. And I'll never forget it. I was having a conversation with you. And I tell this story often. I was having a conversation with you in the realm of service and repair. And I was like, Ryan, is there really that much work out there? And it was funny because your eyes got about as big as dinner saucers. And you're like, bro, you have no idea. And especially in the Denver market, you're like, dude, the Denver market is one of those markets that is just waiting to be cracked open. So that big thing was the awareness piece. And then as we began going through the training, what I did, because as I went through the sales manager training, you give, let's call it 20 action items. And I had those things written down, and I started going after those action items to the point where, like, if you would have walked into our office this time last year and walk into our office right now, it is a completely different place. We knocked down walls. We built a sales room. We got like the sick table in here now. Because we're already have a beautiful view of the mountains. And that was really this first step to changing culture, to really getting the internal people to start seeing like, okay, Damen and JJ are for real. Like, and they already knew we're very genuine, authentic men, but they're really taking ownership of this, because like the physical aspect of the office was changing. And for them, that's a big thing, right? When their physical surroundings start to change, there was this lightness that started coming and this new birth that started coming, and it was just really cool. So then taking that, we began moving forward into, okay, what does it really look like to go after commercial business? And so we started calling on centers of influence. We started just really getting our name out in the market. And what you're really good at, Brian, is renewing the mind. That's one of the things you're really good at, is there's a pathway that you're so used to, and you kind of dig a trench and you want to operate in that pathway because it feels comfy. Even though you might have somebody lording over you for a few months, you're like, well, storms are coming, it's going to get better. So we're like, well, no, let's shift gears and let's get over here, even though it's incredibly uncomfortable. It takes a tremendous amount of work. I mean, I was working 7 days a week before we met you, and then I started working 7 days a week, but we were moving towards something, right? And so just starting to carve out, and one of the things you're really good at is what we call shaping the path, right? So like clearing all the brush for us and saying, hey man, you just got to go after it and get it. And today, JJ and I have effectively changed the culture of the entire company.
Wow. So describe the culture now on this side of what you've done with my help.
Dude, it's so good, man. So like, I'm going to give you one really powerful example. Since we built this sales room, which I'm currently sitting in, every Tuesday we have these staff meetings. And the staff meeting is an opportunity to collectively pool ideas and really begin to ferret out and map out how are we going after this. So we started these, I think we've been doing it now for about 4.5 months. And one of the things that we did was we started going through books as a company together. Like we started with a book called The Power of Habit. And then we started then we went to Switch. And now we're going through a book called Crucial Conversations. And so we spend the first part of the meeting going through these books and which are all about change and culture change and develop healthy habits, right? So inside of these meetings, and then we get to action items and, okay, what do we have to do and get accomplished this week in order to meet this next goal that we're having? Dude, we never did anything like that before. Let me talk to you about meetings before. Here's how they went. Owner of the company comes in, sits down, no staff is involved, basically says to whatever sales guys we have at the moment, hey, you need to go get some deals. Okay, yeah, why don't you have a $5 million pipeline? And then like you walk out of those meetings totally deflated. You don't have any energy. It was just bad. Like I hated that email. Hey, we're having a meeting on Monday. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me right now. Dude, when we leave our meetings now, bro, it's unbelievable. People are energized. They're ready to rock. Everybody has a clear idea of where they're going and what they're going after. And man, we're just getting it, man. We're just getting it.
Come on, bro. That's awesome. So has it been a year and a half since working with me, or a year? I'm trying to remember now. Maybe
dude, no, it's been 8 months, bro.
8 months. Wow. Forgive me. Time flies. So let's talk like the strategy culture that's adjusted and you know, you're going to reap long-term benefits from that. But what are some of the immediate impacts that you've seen in the numbers? You know, like what have you noticed with metrics wise that change since the 9 years that you've done up to this point to this new level of focus with my help?
Excuse me. Yeah. So I'll give you an example using January. So January we did 5 commercial jobs, which we've never done in the history of our company. Okay. And the reason why that's a big deal is because in Colorado, what we've learned is that when you turn off the residential faucet, the commercial faucet turns on. So most commercial stuff actually happens in the wintertime here. Okay. And so what's really cool about that is bringing in the revenue we did in January really did something for JJ's business partner, Brian. He really began to believe that this is possible. Like when he saw all that revenue come in our slowest month of the year, he's like, wait a second. And now even the way he's talking is totally different. He was never involved in our staff meetings. Dude, he's at every staff meeting now. He's wanting to go through the books with us. He's using this word I've never heard him use, and I've known the man for almost a decade, unity. Mm-hmm. He's talking about unity, okay? Mm-hmm. So the revenue that came in, and we had revenue start coming in commercial in November. But January was such a big deal because he put out a goal, which normally when he puts out a goal is very deflating because it's always like almost unattainable. So he put out this goal and we not only met it, we beat it. We beat his goal. That's the first time that since I've been at the company that he's put out a goal in this time of year that we've ever even got close to it, but we exceeded it. And so that in itself was monumental, man.
Gotcha. So just offsetting the revenue inside of 6 months in November in commercial when it's starting to slow down in the past 9 years, you're offsetting that to becoming a more resilient company throughout the 12 months. And it's not only just in theory, you're seeing it happen now, which is huge. And you have the culture to sustain it and grow. Okay. So that's good info. Let's talk a little bit about because getting into commercial, for example, it could take for a long time for some people, because of the deal sizes. And many people have seen me accelerate that process with my help to accelerate that. So kind of share with me the timeline. So you're looking at from when you started to getting some deals 8 months ago. So then the 6 months was November. So within 5 to 6 months, you got some business, had a record month in January. 6 months after you started, or 7 months. What's kind of the pipeline have to look like now? Talk about pipeline. You're not just bidding a bunch of commercial work, right? It's relational, qualified. Talk to that a little bit now because you're not doubling in size right now yet, but it's an entirely different company. and it's changing, and you can see the future. Talk a little bit about pipeline and things like that, and like the approach to pipeline now.
Yeah. So we, one of the things I did is I had courted a man to come onto this company that I had wanted for a really long time. And here's the thing: bringing somebody into a roofing, storm-driven construction company in October is kind of like career suicide, right? It's kind of like, why on earth would you do something like that? But I was clear that this man needed to come on. And and part of the reason we were able to do that is because of this commercial component that was now brewing in the company, right? And not only that, the training that you offer, being able to say, hey, we also have this really powerful training component that we're going through as well, and that we're going to start as soon as you come on. And so, and he did the sales evaluation earlier in the summer with us, and it was just like, it was a long process, a long courtship, but we finally brought him over. And so that was a big deal, because without that new component of commercial, I mean, it really wouldn't have made sense to bring him on, because he's a hunter and he's incredible at it, right? And so what happened was, as he comes on, and this wealth of knowledge he had already in sales and centers of influence and all those things, he was immediately able to put feet to the things that you were teaching us and go out and start getting things which were giving other people in the company buy-in. All right. And so now today we have almost a $3 million commercial pipeline. It's almost at 3 million. When you and I just talked the other day, it was at 2 million. We've almost got another $1 million in business in less than a week. And so what our goal is to close $1 million in business by June 1. That's the goal we got from Brian. So we know that we have to have at least 3 million in our pipeline. So we're there now, but we want to pump that pipeline up to 10 to 15 so that we can, by the end of the year, close $3 to $3.5 million in commercial business. And I can tell you this: we have the storm environment dialed into a T. I mean, we're one of the top companies in the state. That's just the reality, right? We're platinum with OC, and I mean, we have a lot of good things going on. Member of the CRA, you know, over 100 Google reviews, 4.8 stars, all of those things. So we have residential insurance dialed in. All right. If we can put $3.5 million onto the 5 to 6 million that we do, I mean, that gets us at 10. The biggest year we've ever had was 7. Okay. And that was in 2018. Dude, last year, it wasn't the same year. Last year, we only did 2.6. Okay. With the same staff. Right. So we had to bring all that same staff through the wintertime. So our goal is 3.5 million in commercial business by December 31st of this year. And we're going to do it, man. Like, it's going to happen.
Awesome. So we're going from, you know, unpredictable storm, biggest year 7, last year 2.7 to, you know, if potentially a $7 to $10 million, but 3 of that's commercial, B2B, relational, non-storm dependent type of work that you can build on with, you know, $10 to $15 million pipeline in the first 12 months.
Yeah. And here's what's cool about that. Let's say, for instance, 2012 happens again. In 2012, Colorado got 0 storms, 0, right? So let's say that happens again. Well, we don't have to freak out and be like, oh my gosh, we don't have a storm, because we have this commercial pipeline that's already producing fruit. We're just going to keep working that pipeline, right? And then if the storm doesn't happen, now where my guys would be exercising all of that time and energy out in the field doing storm chasing, dude, they're just focusing their energies even more into the commercial realm, which means we'd probably do more than 3.5 million, which is still good and still keeps our company and our doors open, and it doesn't have that lording over, oh my gosh, we're going to die feeling that sometimes happens with the owner when we don't have consistent revenue.
Gotcha. So very cool. So thanks for sharing all that. So typically when somebody buys the program, they're going to spend anywhere between 8 to 20,000 for the Sales Accelerator with group coaching, with the evaluations, depending on the number of salespeople they have, like I said, and the masterminds, you know, 30 grand a year on top of that. How many times over would you say in 8 months you've seen your investment pay for itself, you know, financially, if you had to put a number to it, and then how soon did it actually pay for itself? So how many times over has it paid for itself, and then how soon did it pay for itself?
So if we want to just use revenue generation as that metric first, if we want to just use revenue generation, and we're just going to suck out commercial. I'm not even going to talk about what your program has even done for us in the residential realm. I'm not even going to speak to that yet. So if I just say commercial, the program was paid for by the second job that we got in December. Program was paid for. Okay, if we're just using commercial business as an example, all right. So that being said, our investment was paid for by December. In the residential realm, because of your sales training and even being able to shorten up our sales cycle and our sales timeline, our closing timeline, I can actually speak about just one personal job that I did where I had this moment where everything just clicked. And I've been in sales for I've been in sales for 25 years, okay? And I'm sitting across the table with this homeowner, and this homeowner is doing everything in her power to pull me over to third base. I mean, like, she literally is doing, and to the point where I offended her. I 100% offended her. But it was cool because I didn't care, because I was like, I need to be able to tell the men that is learning this program that this 100% works, even if it means that I lose this job. And this is a fat job, beautiful house right off a golf course up in Lafayette, Colorado. I mean, it's a stellar job, right? So I had this moment where I'm going through all of her compelling reasons, and I'm actually typing it on my iPad that I'm talking to. I'm typing it out. I'm just grilling her with all these questions. She literally at one point grabs my iPad and goes to turn it around, and she's like, "What are you doing?" Like, she was so frustrated because all she wanted me to do was look at her scope. She wanted me to look at her scope, tell me exactly if the insurance gave her enough money, what work I could do, and I just told her, I was just like, "Ma'am, that's great. We'll get to this in a little bit." And I just put it back in front of her, and like, she was upset. She was really upset. So here's what I realized in that moment. I was like, because we are so good at insurance, I was like, what we have been doing, and we still got a lot of jobs, but what we've been doing was educating our homeowners. We weren't being consultative. We were being educational. We were educating our homeowners on exactly what they needed to do in order to get their job done right, giving them all of our ammunition for them to go shop other contractors. And so in that moment, I was just like, oh, that ain't going down. That's not happening today. So I went through, and it was so good, man. So I said, is there anything from stopping you making a decision today? And because I had already ferreted out with her that, she could make the decision without her husband, straight up. So I don't need my husband. I said, okay, well, I'm all right if you don't need your husband. So we got to the very end of it. I said, okay. I said, so I've answered all your questions? She's like, yeah. I said, great. And I haven't even looked at her scope yet. She said, okay. She goes, well, I said, so we can start signing paperwork. And she goes, well, like, you want me to sign right now? I'm like, well, absolutely. Like, unless you just tell me you completely do not trust me, which based on what we just did, you said you do, then is there any reason why you shouldn't sign with me right now? She goes, no, but can I just call my husband and tell him that I'm signing with you? I'm like, yeah, sure. Are you sure you don't need to ask permission? She's like, no, I don't need to ask permission. I said, okay, great. So she gets on the phone and she's like, hey, so I'm sitting here with Damen, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to sign this contract right now. And she's like, no, he wants me to sign right now. And I told him that I have the authority to do that. And she goes, yeah, okay, love you, bye. I said, all right, let's roll. And she signed, and then we started looking at her scope and going over her property and walking her property with her. Dude, that moment for me was absolutely incredible. In the residential realm, that's a $45,000 job. In the residential realm, which is highly profitable, okay? And so I was able to go back to the men and say, guys, this stuff absolutely works. That one job, Ryan, that one job pays for your program, straight up. That's how profitable that job is.
Good.
And that's not to mention the culture stuff and all of the renewing of mind stuff, which, I mean, is invaluable. Right? I mean, just hard numbers. Those two jobs alone paid for your program twice over.
Awesome. Cool. So since then, what have you seen since the vehicle's been purchased? You turn on the vehicle, you're driving the vehicle. What does the future look like in the mirror or in the windshield? Like, what are you guys thinking of seeing? Yeah, just express a little bit about what your outlooks look like as a company, in your role, uh, leading the sales organization, things like that with your company.
Yeah, so really what we're going after is, so there's some really cool things that have brewed inside of, there's a lot of stuff that happens organically, like as you begin moving and changing culture and having these meetings and really begin to go after something. And then once you have that belief, and then, and Brian was the last bastion, man. Like once we finally got that belief from him, we were already moving, but now that he's really on board and he's even making additional investments towards commercial, which is awesome. So here's where we're at. So I want to be, by 2025, I want to be at 15 million. Okay. And I think that timeline is good. I think we might even get there quicker just based on what we're seeing. But then at the same time, I didn't want to overwhelm everybody. So I'm like, by 2024, which would basically just over double what we're pretty accustomed to doing, right? And just over double in about 5 years, all right? So, and really looking at that, looking at more than half of our business being commercial business, 8 to 9 to 10 million. Now, me personally, because we're going after relationships and centers of influence, and we have a whole agent component to what we're doing, and we're actively searching out agents, which I started in 2017. But because of having so many different job responsibilities and being in a smaller company, I just couldn't maintain those relationships. Today, we can maintain those relationships. Project management companies, fostering those relationships, just having an actual repair division so that we can go and do a leak and maybe do 2 or 3 leaks a year. And then if they do get hit by hail, or then it's time for that full replacement, we have the relationship, right? So what we're doing is really what's known as an account executive mentality. Not a storm chaser mentality, but an account executive. So we're going to have account executives, and then we're going to have what's known as sales account managers or internal wholesalers. So sales support, right? So we're going to scale the company, and of course we need to drive revenue to do that. So for me, like, I'm beating the pavement myself. And the cool thing about that is, as at an executive level, going out and fostering these relationships as a vice president, my word seems to have more clout because it's not just a account executive. But then being able to recruit, because now what we can do is we can bring in, and we don't want storm chasers. I don't even want people with roofing experience. I just want people who have a strong work ethic, a lot of integrity and honesty. And now what we can do is say, hey, we have 200 accounts, and we're going to plug you into these accounts that you can begin managing to foster and build these relationships. And that's why I think 15 by 2025, we'll probably get there a lot quicker. But we've never been able to recruit like that before. Like normally, a storm gets hit, you got every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street that knows anything and everything about roofing, walk in your door and say, give me the world, then I'll give you a few deals. And that's pretty much what you have to deal with. Dude, I don't have to deal with that anymore. Do you know how excited that makes me? Because normally what you end up doing is cleaning up a lot of messes for 6 months and a lot of upset people. We don't have to do that anymore. So that's our vision, man.
That's awesome. That's exciting. So thank you for sharing that. So let me ask you a couple more questions. You have made an investment, but you also put in the time and the energy. So for this to work, if somebody is looking at the program, what are the 2-3 things that are non-negotiable outside the money, the non-negotiable that they have to do in order for them to start realizing the outcomes that they want? What has to be in place?
Number one, so because the person that is on the front lines is going to be the sales manager, because that's where it all starts, right? So the sales manager, or the person who is going to be, like, the football is going to be handed off to you, whoever that person is, to really get this thing going. They have to believe it. I mean, you just have to believe it. You can't sit here and look at an action item and second guess that. And here's what's really cool about that. Because of the relationship that you and I developed very quickly, like literally very quickly, when I began to dig into the program, and I'm telling whoever's listening to this, you have to hear what I'm saying, because this is really important. When you begin to look at this program and all these action items, you can't say to yourself, well, I don't know if I should skip number 3 because maybe number 4 I can do better, or you're going to wear yourself out. What I did, because I believed in you, Immediately I said, Ryan said, do this, I'm doing that. Ryan said, do this, I'm doing that. Ryan said, and I was wearing out the office, bro. I was wearing them out. Like, they were so sick of hearing your name, dude. But I'm like, guys, if this method is working, and Matt, that's the gentleman I courted and brought on, he said, the thing that I love about you, Damen, is you operate in what's known as a singularity. Dude, once I grab onto something, man, I'm going to prove one of two things. Either he's spot on and it works, or he has no idea what he's talking about, and we just wasted our investment. But I'm not going to go into it thinking, well, this might or might not work. Why would you even live your life that way? Right. So I just said, if Ryan said to do it, guys, we're going to do it. And I got to be honest, people got a little uncomfortable, and I'm glad for that, because that's where growth comes from. And people are like, dude, why is he? Because I was going 100 miles an hour, bro. And here's the reality. We're seeing fruit today, but you have to have belief, okay? You have to do what you're told, and be okay being a servant. Be okay putting yourself under Ryan's authority. Be okay, because the whole heart behind this program is to come alongside of you and make you better, add value to you. I mean, I'm reading this book right now called The Go-Giver, and it's a really cool story. And one of the things that this gentleman says to another gentleman who is uber successful is, why don't you ask the question, does it make money? And he goes, well, that's not a bad question. It's just the bad first question. The best first question is, does it add value to others? Followed up by, does it make money? And that's what Ryan does. Ryan, that's what you do, man. You add value. And so you have to have belief. You have to do what you're told. Put yourself in a subservient position and just say, I'm going to go after this. And then just watch what begins to happen. Because I'm sitting in this room right now, and I come in super early every morning. I get here at 6:30 a.m. It's still dark outside. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, dude, 8 months ago, this place looked like shambles, man. Because we were just always going, and then freaking out, always going, freaking out. And now, dude, we're just operating in consistency. And so that's what I would say.
So good. So they got to believe it. They got to listen, do what they're told, and then just start watching things happen.
Oh, number 3. Hold on. There's a third one. You have to be willing to sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Dude, I have spent Saturdays, I've spent Sundays, and this might be a turnoff to some people, but those are the people who are not going to be millionaires. And I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to be a millionaire in this industry, straight up. That's what's going down. I am going to be a millionaire in this industry. And I've had that vision for a while. I got that vision back in 2013, and I've been working as hard as I can to get there. And I think now it's just going to be accelerated. I'm going to get there quicker than I thought, right? So if you're not willing to sacrifice time, then you're not going to be able to see the results that are available to you. And you might, but it's going to take a lot more time. Like, dude, Saturdays and Sundays and evenings and processing, and with JJ, we're talking and our wives are incredibly gracious women and just let us be knuckleheads because we talk about this stuff all the time. But they're just in it with us, and because they're seeing the fruit. And so that would be the belief, service, and sacrifice, bro. Those 3 things will get you going. That's why I think we're at where we are in only 8 months.
Yeah, you turned the corner fast. Well, man, that's really good. Thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing all this stuff. And I think the outlook is great. I mean, you're just getting warmed up, really. You got the foundation laid. You got some people. I know some of the guys didn't make the cut. They just couldn't stick with it too. I mean, could you speak to that for a moment? Because a lot has changed. Everything changed, but also people change with that too. So, can you share that a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's something that you have to be okay with, which in a storm environment, in a storm type company, when sales guys start to leave that you've had for a long time, which is very rare, you start to freak out, right? Like me, I'm good, man. I know where my identity is, and I'm good, right? And I know where we're going. But like ownership, high level, they're like, if we don't have sales guys, we don't have any money coming in, right? And so that was a process in itself, which ended up being really good. But yeah, so we started with the program with 5 guys, and 2 of the guys, one had been with me for 7 years, and one had been with me for 4 years. They were our longest tenured sales guys, and really good. I mean, really good. But because our standards were changing, because there was accountability being developed, and there was new activities and responsibilities that we were saying you guys have to engage in. They literally went to, I don't want to be told what to do. I like my freedom. I want to storm chase. And so I said, well, you can do that, but you just can't do that here. And because if you're not going to help us with this vision, then there's really no reason for you to be here. And the cool thing was, the men that left, we left on very good terms. There's no hard feelings. We're still in communication. We're still helping them and edifying them. But there's probably going to be a level of attrition. If you have a large sales organization and you have 10, 15, 20 guys and gals, I mean, you're probably looking at some of those people, if they're used to operating in freedoms and in storms and things like that. I mean, you're probably looking at 20, 30% might walk out the door, but you have to be okay with that, and we are okay with that. And it's even grown the leadership of the company closer together while this has happened, because we began to press into one another and say, okay, well, that means that if we lost 2 or 3 guys, we got to fill in the gaps, and we got to be okay with that until we get this thing off the ground. And so that it's been really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's going to happen because the standards are higher. The vision has changed. Sacrifice is there, and people are going to get really uncomfortable, or they're going to stay with you and change with you, or they're going to bump or jump ship. And I think it's not uncommon that all my most successful clients had those, that dead weight that just, was holding everybody back a little bit, and they just didn't want to stick around, and they're thankful for it. Everyone's happy. It's not like they're sad. They're like, that was a good thing. So,
and let me add one final thing to that, to the business owner, to the sales, executives out there, that our natural tendency is to try to hold on to those types of people, right? That's whether you've got relationships with them, and a lot of those relationships can be offsite relationships where you hang out with them on the weekends and barbecue and all those kind of things, right? So the natural tendency is like, I've got to hold on to these relationships, but here's why that's incredibly dangerous. Somebody who's not bought into your system, that doesn't have the belief, will become a cancer, because they're going to continue chewing on the other people that are in your organization, that are in the organization, and they're really going to bring them down. They're going to cast doubt. And you don't want somebody casting doubt when you're trying to develop all of this momentum in one direction, and you have these little cancers that are amongst the troops and causing dissension. You just don't want that. So if it's time for them to leave, you got to be okay with them leaving, and it's going to make the whole organization healthier.
Totally. That's good. Well, thank you, Damen. Really appreciate what you guys have done and the action you've taken, and glad to hear these results in a short time. And can't wait to do this again in a year or two, and things are just a completely different stratosphere. So I'm going to wrap up this interview. Thanks, my friend.